more puzzled by?
Well, I think with Breers, he was never, for most of his career until the very latter stages, he wasn't in a massively successful Warrington side.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Was he? So it was more like how much of it was about he stood out in a side that didn't have as many standout sort of players, and it's very similar with Brough for much. In fact, Brough also, the thing we have to remember is he broke into regular Super League action fairly, a little bit older than some of these other sort of star players. And I think until he went to Huddersfield, he'd just had that one good summer at Hull where he got into the team and didn't stay in the team at all there. And then obviously he rolled around a little bit at people like Wakefield and stuff, and did a good job, but in a poor team sort of thing. So, but it's those two, isn't it? You've got to think it's hard to step away, especially because we've had so many problems at the half-back position, getting someone who can manage a game properly, can organise the people around him, and they're two players who owned their sides.
Definitely.
And so you can't really stray too far beyond those two, can you?
No, I wouldn't have said so. Breeze just gets my vote. I think I prefer Lee Breeze. Anyway, who's next?
Maybe because Brough just seems like
it's
like the negatives with Brough kind of keep coming out, don't they? More. Yeah. Although this week the positives of Brough too. Christopher McKeown.
Christmas.
Said, now then lads, just a quick email with my thoughts on the recent Amor and Watts sendings off. For me, both of them are red cards. The reason I say this is, regardless of the intent and outcome in relation to players' health, both tackles had a tackle outcome where the player's head was forcefully struck by an opponent. Whether this occurs on purpose, by accident, I don't think is irrelevant. Player welfare is most important. Whether it's a bad tackle technique or grubby play, tackles that end up with players being struck forcefully to the head need to be stopped. Red cards being used in these situations will hopefully make coaches and players address it. The intent of the tackle and the player's welfare outcome, in my view, should then be considered when they are reviewing it at the disciplinary committee, not by the referee in the game. People may disagree, but that's my view on them anyway, and I thought I'd share. Keep up the good work, Chris.
Well, we are a forum for everyone's opinions, and Chris's are usually very well informed and rounded.
Yeah,
which is my polite way of saying I sort of disagree with him. But
I've got no issue with cards being pulled out for this sort of situation, but rugby league's such a physical game, and the players go at it full tilt, that I think we have to be careful about.
There needs to be room for some
automatic red sort of cards, and I actually don't know if either of these tackles, after review, warranted red cards.
No.
But I have got no objection if a referee sees it as
a red card,
as forceful direct contact to the head, getting his red card out of his pocket, and then obviously sometimes referees maybe don't see that split little difference, that the panel get to spend a little bit longer reviewing.
Well, they get to deliberate over that, and that's the whole point, isn't it? So you want referees to have a firm hand, and that's something we would encourage, isn't it?
I'm basically halfway to Chris's point of view, but not fully there. I think red cards should be used more in like the dangerous contact sort of realm. I think stuff like what Brett Ferris did, stuff like what Sika Manu did the other day, they're the ones that's
the grubby stuff, next up,
Philip Nadin got in touch. He sent a long email. Most of it was trying to sort of shoe on extra match review stuff in there, but it's getting cheeky with that.
The rules, Phil.
But it didn't make me laugh enough to put in. It was more just like patting all his Hull players on the back. So his review stays as is, but his other points make it into this bit. So he says, right, discussion time. Tackling by the pulling of the shirt as the main method of tackling and swinging the player around by the shirt like some sort of merry-go-round should be banned. In my opinion, it's just lazy play and makes them look like footballers cheating. Before we go on to thought number 2, any...
I think it's the mark of a poor defensive read, and what have you, but I don't think it should be banned. Particularly, I don't have that strong a feeling of it. I always see it as, when I see that happening, I blame the tackler. I blame the guy that's doing it for being out of position, or having made a poor read, or having been sold about, or having been sold at the line and not having adjusted. And I think that it's them trying to save a tackle bust or slow a guy down enough for the next guy to come in. So there deserves to be some ground gain there, but I don't think it's something that he's banning. I don't think
it's just like a desperation thing, isn't it? When you're reaching out and all you get is a bit of the shirt, maybe by the collar or maybe somewhere else. The thing with rugby league shirts is they rip relatively easily. In the NFL, they have like a rule they call the horse collar rule, where you can't reach inside the back of a guy's jersey and pull them down by that. But I don't think these are as much of that, and in that you've got to remember they have the big fixed pads on.
So there's a gap there, isn't there?
Which you can get behind, and it sort of judders the person within the pads have got on and stuff. And I think that's a bit more dangerous compared to a shirt that could rip and that sort of thing. So I'm not with Phil on.
Yeah, sorry, Phil.
On it, but you know,
I'd like to know his tone though, because he could be having a laugh with us. So maybe he's just having a bit of a...
No, I think he means it, yeah. Thought number 2, the consistency of refs' interpretation of loose carries and knock-ons. I think this is somewhere
we could devote an entire series of Super League pods to this.
In the whole game, there was 3 loose carries. 2 were identical. Player on the floor with the ball going backwards. It comes loose, but still with the player. Only 1 penalty given. Even Sky said that one was wrongly given, and the second was a knock-on by lineman. But the ball never hit the ground or another player. And I've seen this before, not given, and seen a struggling act and carry on. I think we've talked about this a little bit the other week as well, about the consistency of these sorts of things. Referees make mistakes, and I think in this one, the match officials, I think there was a Matty Russell one that rolled, that everything was going backwards and the tackle was never really complete when the ball came loose and was going backwards. So you could have said play on. It's a very difficult thing to get, but I am with Phil completely on this. I want to see them consistently giving the same decision. So even if something's if an action that happens is very similar, then just give it the same way every time. It is what I'd prefer to see. But because it's often difficult to know what is actually correct in these, especially in the ball strip or knock-on scenarios, we more commonly see where it's more a player still standing up and it comes out and it's like, was it a loose carry, was it a reefed ball? And I think the referees have to be the same with any of those. So if there's no pulling action, even if a hand has knocked the ball out from like coming over the shoulder or being around the ball but not actually trying to pull the ball out, then always give it as a knock-on, always give it as a loose carry sort of thing, or always give it a penalty if you're going to set your stall out like that's what you're doing. But I am with him on that. There needs to be consistency within each game by each referee. I don't think it should be exactly the same between different games, because I think as a referee you need to react to how that game is progressing, sort of thing. Yeah,
I see that. Next up, or do we have more of Phil?
To finish with, players have been forced out into touch from 2 metres or so from the touchline, getting launched into row F by some freight train when you're 2 inches off the touchline is fair play, but being dragged or picked up, slung over the shoulder and then dumped like someone trying to get rid of a body in a river shouldn't be allowed.
Well, I like your turn of phrase.
Yeah, I know the act of a man being physically dragged that isn't a single or continuous movement is a penalty, but surely if the attacking player has stopped going forward, is held up by 3 or 4 defenders and then pushed or dragged 2 metres into touch is wrong. The tackle has been made when the player has stopped going forward and can't release the ball, surely. Back to Tom and Mark in the studio. Fill in.
Well, I disagree with Phil. I think it takes a certain amount of defensive effort and skill to execute that properly without dragging him to do the pushing. So I don't particularly mind.
I think it's a physical game.
That side of things. I want to see that, to be honest with you. I like that defensive effort.
The ones I don't like are the ones where a player is literally stood up and the whole call doesn't come early enough, because they're the ones I think where you risk injuries and that sort of thing, and I've seen quite a few of those recently.
But when you see that big defensive effort and you get that more
when a player's constantly moving,
the thing, I like that. That says to me that a team's on it defensively and they are enthusiastic about defence.
And I think
I like to see that.
There's enough. If a player was unceremoniously dumped in a way that it shouldn't be, it would still be a penalty.
Of course it would, yeah.
There's rules as well around, like, dragging, like Phil points out. Some of that would become a penalty. So
I think it's well policed, to be honest with you, that idea of it. And like I say, it goes to a strong team defensive ethic for me. So I think it should be rewarded and good when executed properly.
Good points, and thanks for your thoughts, Phil. I'm 1 and 2. 1, 4 and 2, not quite with him on those.
Yeah, I think I was 1 and 2 again, wasn't I? Yeah.
But great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, next up.
Rich Wilkinson said, just heard an interview with Wayne Bennett saying we had a lack of quality in edge back rowers. I'm not sure if Farrell was left out due to just coming back from injury, ? No, it's because he doesn't like him. But that's a fucking joke and an insult.
Are you his dad?
Well, maybe. That's a fucking joke and an insult.
Yeah,
this is not right. I love the World Cup, and I would be gutted if McQueen and the likes are playing in October. And then he lists some players. He says Farrell, Ward, Westerman, Greenwood. A recall for Ellis, for fuck's sake. I would rather have Mickey Mack in the back row than those picked.
Yeah. Mark, I find it very hard to disagree with anything Rich says on that.
The first 4 names.
I'm pretty sure he's joking about Michael McLaurin.
Yeah.
And you know,
but the first 4 names are names that jump to the top of the list straight away when you're thinking about it. Then, I mean, you even have
listen,
Darryl Clark
right?
Not Darryl Clark, Darryl Powell talking about. He talked a lot about his own players. Every single fucking one of them should be in the England squad, as far as he was concerned. I think it's a little bit
a fairly valid point with a lot of them.
But like people, no, but he's pointing out other people like Milner, who have had a great start to the season in the back row this year. And then there's players all around the place. There's people like Matt Whitley who are doing a good job in a shit side, and.
But we just talked about that. I know lads who do a good job in a shit side don't often get international recognition.
Yeah. But Liam Farrell is just ridiculous.
I'm going to reserve judgment on the Liam Farrell thing until the squad is announced for the World Cup. And if he isn't in the fucking squad, then I'm going to vent my spleen over it. But at the moment, I'm hoping that it's a misjudgment in terms of... Or it's not a misjudgment. I'm hoping that he's just back from injury. He's got a relationship with Sean Wayne. He's managing the way the young man is allowed to recover.
He's not just back from injury.
Well, maybe they're managing him. I don't know. We don't know what's going on.
Chris McQueen actually did have his best, probably one of his best games for the Titans this week. Actually playing in the position he'll get put in for England. So, so on that basis, maybe Bennett's pulled. And I've got no issue with the selection in terms of the criteria or any of that. I don't really get too bent out of shape about that nowadays. I think it's what's done is that the rules are getting stricter, and I think that's okay. Yeah,
I read an interesting piece that James Graham, an interview that they're doing with James Graham. I don't know if you saw it as well, but they asked him about the idea of Aussies playing, and he basically said, "Look, I haven't got a problem with it. It's lads who want to represent their heritage, and that's the way the sport is, and we benefit from it in the same way as everybody else, including the Aussies." And he's got an English dad, and he's got the opportunity to represent the heritage of his family. And when you think of it in terms of that, then it feels less mercenary to me, because if I was,
an issue with McQueen is it's turned down the opportunity to play for England in the past, apparently.
Right.
Which pisses me off a bit.
Well, if he thought,
but that's a personal one on that selection. But I also don't think he's been good enough for 3 seasons when Liam Farrell obviously has. But whatever.
Well, like I say, I'll reserve judgment before chucking my toys out of the pram on the Liam Farrell thing, and then I'll join in if he doesn't make the squad. Does that sound fair enough to you?
Yeah.
Cool, alright. Right, well, that's the end of feedback and shout-outs for this week. Let's take a look now at news from around the world of rugby league. So, 2 news from around the world of rugby league then, and we'll start with international news. England's Gareth Widdop will miss the mid-season test against Samoa after he was ruled out for 6 weeks with knee ligament damage. The 28-year-old limped off during St George Illawarra's 13-12 Anzac Day defeat to the Sydney Roosters, and the club has confirmed the injury following the game. Scans showed, inverted commas, significant damage to the medial collateral ligament. George Williams has also been ruled out after a knee injury forced him off at half-time of Wigan's defeat to Castleford. A scan is expected to take place on Tuesday to reveal the full extent of the injury. Warrington Wolves pair Stephen Ratchford and Kevin Brown have been called into the 20-man squad to replace them. So, not good news in terms of our first choice 2 or 3 halfbacks, you would say. John Scott got in touch. He said, "Strange, the only people I can find happy about Brown getting an England call-up are Warrington fans as he misses next week's game." Very good.
I don't know how much. I mean, Kevin Brown actually had a reasonable game, didn't he? Do you remember all the way back in that World Club Series game that Wayne Bennett will have seen? Obviously, he's not watched much Super League since then.
No, but again, he's got his boys, hasn't he? He's definitely got his boys, hasn't he, Wayne Bennett?
Yeah.
What about a deck pattern? If you're going to take a Warrington half, maybe he's not in the thinking.
But this is what I'm saying. Wayne Bennett isn't thinking about the future.
No,
he isn't thinking about the fringe people who might be around the squad for the next few years for these selections. He's thinking about, I want to have my legacy, have a World Cup win for England on it.
Yeah.